Patents, Profit, and Purpose, our virtual summit. We've had several inventors already, and today it's my honor to welcome Wayne Fromm, an amazing inventor. Let me get my PowerPoint, and you'll learn a little bit about him shortly in a video as well. So purpose, patents, and profit. And of course, Wayne Fromm again, amazing inventor. He's got an unbelievable story. I think it's something that inventors need to hear. His products have generated over $1 billion in sales. Here's the whole write-up on him on Business Insider. And then Jenny's our moderator. Jenny, if you can start the video, a short interview of Wayne as well.
Origin of the selfie stick. Sage and I were traveling. She was young, and we were actually in Europe. I was in Italy at the Ponte Vecchio, and she was taking a picture of me. I was taking a picture of her. And then you're trying to flag down somebody that understands English, which is not always. You have to kind of wait to see who might be likely. Somebody wearing a camera, maybe, or I would stabilize it on a fence or post of some sort and set the self timer and have to run in. I kept thinking, there's got to be a better way, or we'd be at a restaurant, we want to get a picture of the two of us, and I'd put sugar packets to try to stabilize it, but then we're taking a picture that's kind of up our nose more. So this is where I thought, okay, how do we get it so that the camera would appear to be floating in air as if a ghost is holding it? And that was the genesis of it.
Well, when I was at Western University, I would bring the Quickpod over there and I'd take it to parties and stuff like that, and everyone thought it was so cool. But at the time, the word selfie, didn't really exist, wasn't popular, so we had to create names. We called it a monopod, handheld monopod, and then the evolution, it just kept going. The selfie craze hit, and then everyone just started calling it a selfie stick. And I mean, I've always loved it. I thought it was really fun, but it's really nice that people are recognizing that it's a really fun, I guess, accessory.
The history of my own inventions, they were always inspired for Sage as she grew up. So there's an evolution of inventions, starting with toys. And I had things like tie-dye Teddy, which was a little thing to teach her the art of tie-dye. And it became a very popular toy, and it became tie-dye Doodle Bear and tie-dye Barbie. It went on into all sorts of different variations. And then the magic mirror, because when Sage was a kid, took her to see Beauty and the Beast, and it was a great animation. I remember taking Sage to a Disney meeting in Glendale, California.
I was 4.
And she was like 4 running around, and then somebody said, she was at the first, she's grown up in this industry. And she was always with her and her friends. They were my test market. I never showed strangers. Like we have little focus groups of these little kids and their parents, and getting their opinions. So it's the Quickpod, the selfie stick, is really an extension, no pun intended, of that whole inventing for Sage. And as a family, I just thought it would be nice for us and other families to be able to be included in the photo. It wasn't meant just for somebody to sit there taking 600 of their own photographs. It was that the photographer was never left out of the picture. That was the original intention.
It's funny how there's a part of inventing where human nature always plays a part, and there's only so much engineers and scientists can do about predicting that. I'm a structural engineer myself, and one of the things that at least with automobiles, for example, an engineer can make the door ultra light, so light that you could, with a finger, you could close the door of your car. And it would have the same structural strength. However, nobody would buy it because they don't feel safe if your door doesn't have some weight to it, some heftiness to it. So sometimes, social restraints prevent inventions that might have a practical benefit. The clip-on tie is another example. This is a real tie, of course, but the reason I don't wear a clip-on is because you don't look, heaven forbid, it's seen by an opposing counsel or a judge. You're not taken seriously with a clip-on. But from a practical standpoint, it's better for your neck. It's cooler. It's easier to put on, easier to take off. You don't have this fabric thing around. So social aspects dictate how an invention ends up being used. And that's something that you didn't predict with your invention. right? Like that was, you didn't expect people to be, the primary use was not, hey, let's let everybody take a picture of themselves.
Yeah, I had actually bounced the idea off people that I know in different countries. And a friend of mine from South Korea, initially said about the selfie stick that, our culture would not embrace that. It's too egotistical. And, this is where, we can listen to people, but we also have to listen to our own instincts. And of course, with a lightweight car door, if people become aware that carbon fiber and all sorts of structural changes, and you can prove to them that it's a better way, it does take time, but I do believe that they will embrace these things when it makes more sense.
Yeah, and that's but it takes a lot of education and timing. But I want to go back because I kind of jumped ahead to that just because from your interview. But tell us your story. I mean, no one is born an inventor. What were you doing before you started thinking of ideas? What was your day job, so to speak? And paint a picture for us of where you got your start.
Sure. Well, I've always had an interest in taking things apart, and it was, good for the clock industry, but not so much for my parents because I would always disassemble things throughout the house. And so it's a natural curiosity. I just love understanding how things work. And even in my house, television set, remote controls. So it's been a natural affinity that I have towards disassembling things and putting them together and seeing what's needed, what's not needed, and why did they do it a certain way. So I grew up also as an entrepreneur, collecting pop bottles, soda bottles as a kid for, recycling and the paper route and, running small businesses. I used to perform magic tricks. I was only 10 years old, but I would be performing magic tricks at kids' birthday parties, entertaining them. And I think magic had a lot to do with it because it's a very curious industry as well. And it's a matter of, doing things that aren't obvious. And that's part of inventing. And I wasn't aware at that time why I was so fascinated by magic, but I had to understand, how do these tricks work? How can we create a story, a narrative to divert other people's attention? And a lot of the inventions that I did, especially the toys, had a magic component to it. The Disney's Beauty and the Beast magic talking mirror, the character images appeared through the two-way mirror material. And, even the selfie stick, to some degree, it's like your camera was magically, or smartphone magically levitating, so that, your arms appear to be in a natural position. The heads are composed and proportionate to one another as well. Throughout high school, I ran businesses. I had a housing rental agency. I had a t-shirt a store. I then got into repertory cinema when I was in university. I was running a theater. And then I got into the video game industry where I had large game centers similar to Chuck E. Cheese style birthday party centers. So a lot of that was combat training for the marketing and commercialization of inventions, because, it's one thing to invent and it's another thing to exploit your own invention. And that's, it takes two disciplines in your brain.
That's fascinating. One of the questions from Christopher is asking, there were already others attempting something similar to a selfie stick. I'll just use that term but tell us about that. Some of that's in that Business Insider article as well. But what do you feel are the advantages that gave you an edge over some of those other products?
Well, I've always been into photography. Even as a kid, I would do, darkroom photography, bulk film loading, etc. I had early cameras, SLRs before DSLR, and when I created we call it the Quickpod. That's our brand, and that became known as the Selfie Stick. I was unaware of anything that had been created similar to that. And we had done our prior art searches, and it came up at a late stage that there was a device from the 1980s, but it was created in Japan for a disc camera. But I actually had disc cameras in the 80s, and I had never seen that extension at that time. I ordered one off of eBay, came in from Sweden, somebody had one, and this was already after the fact. We included that as prior art. And if it had been such a great invention, then, you know, it should have become a household item. It didn't. It took me over 10 years of plugging away with Quickpod, taking it onto shopping channels. I was on QVC a number of times. We would sell out each time. It was a lot of hard work doing photo shows, consumer electronics shows, trying to get into the retail chains like Ritz Camera at the time, and catalog stores like Magellan and Sharper Image and Hammacher Schlemmer. This was a very difficult product to have the public understand what it does. Very difficult to package as well, because it just doesn't pop. It wasn't something that people were thinking of. They knew, some people knew what a tripod was, fewer knew what a monopod was, but to actually have a handheld extendable monopod, people didn't know how to use self-timers. They didn't know how to, to trigger the shutter remotely. There were a lot of obstacles, and I brought mine to market before the smartphone, before the iPhone, and we were doing point and shoot cameras and DSLR cameras. We had to prove to people. I was going to the professional stores doing demos, B&H in New York City, for example, and we had to sell and convince the professional photographers the benefit of this device, because at first they thought it was just some sort of, a silly product. But we showed them that there were many applications. You could become a human, tripod. You could use it for lighting. You could use it as a camera brace with the legs. So I anticipated all these different uses for it in my original patent that goes back to, it was issued in 2010, but it predated that by a number of years. I had remote control. I had all sorts of features in it that had not been anticipated before. And we also had a self-image mirror on the device itself, so that you could see yourself in this mirror that was attached to my device. It wasn't, necessary to have it attached to a camera, for example. So there were many unique aspects to this, but it was really a marketing effort, and it really was not. It was like a 10-year overnight success.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny when you mentioned having to educate consumers about the use. I mean, this is something I mentioned yesterday. The Post-it note, originally, they had to give them away because nobody understood why they would even need one. When you can use paper and tape, what's the big deal? And they $1 billion of sales from something like this. Another example, the sleeve on a cup of coffee. I mean, we made it until I think this is 94 or 1999 without this. And then all of a sudden, Jay Sorensen patents it and has $1 million in royalty payments that he's earned for over 20 years from something like this. But sometimes it takes a certain amount of usage and consumers just watching each other use a product before it takes off. So those are two examples. I mean, but the Selfie Stick's something that you realized yourself through a 10-year process that there's some education required.
A lot of education. People liked it when they saw it, but if it was just sitting on a store shelf, I remember going into a store in Manhattan Beach after a consumer electronics show in Vegas, and I asked the retailer, the clerk, the manager, do they have my product? And I knew they had it because we had shipped it to the entire chain, and they finally found it on a lower shelf somewhere. They didn't know what it did. I brought it out. I started explaining to the manager, and we sold 3 of them while I was in the store, just the customers that watched the demonstration. And that's part of coming up with something that's innovative, that's unfamiliar to people. I mean, the coffee sleeve was great because then, as you say, people publicly see it. They can understand it and they can relate to it. And that was free advertising. And that's the hard part. There's several hard parts: inventing, manufacturing, packaging. Less so today because of online sales. Packaging becomes less important, but marketing in general is really the grunt work, the heavy lifting.
Yeah. Well, were there parts along the journey where did the thought of giving up ever occur to you? I mean, 10 years is a long time. At some point, gosh, you know what? I've given it my best. I'm not making inroads. It's not taking off. This is too hard. I'm just going to stop.
An almost infinite number of times. There was one time we had a shipment that was expected to come in. I ordered the first 2,000 units, And I'm somewhat of a perfectionist, and the original packaging had all sorts of little accessories, from carry bags to carabiners to tripod legs to, you know, the whole 9 yards. And I went into my daughter's room and I said to her, I said, if this doesn't succeed, doesn't sell, what else can we use this for? And I kept thinking maybe to extend it and put clothing on it so that people at, you know, retailers at Abercrombie and Fitch, they could put the clothing away on higher shelves or higher racks. So I was constantly coming up with a backup plan to move the inventory if this didn't succeed.
Yeah. And is it, it's funny, we've had Dennis and Mary Lou Green. They're two inventors, they're married, and they create products together, and they've written a book about strengthening their marriage.
Mhm.
Inventing is hard enough when you are making all the decisions yourself, and you don't have that extra relationship. It can be a support system, but also it can sometimes make it harder to make decisions, especially when it's 50-50 and there's two votes. Tell us about working with your daughter on new product ideas. Like, how has that been? Have there been times when you give something a thumbs up, she gives it a thumbs down, and then what do you do as an inventor?
No, we actually work very, very well. It's almost like a dance team. We've got incredible flow. I have strengths in certain areas, and it's like we're working 24/7 because I'm a nocturnal person. So I'll be working throughout the night, you know, coming up with ways to innovate or improve our new products. And she'll wake up and she'll comment and she'll say, well, what about this? Or she'll give it a different shape or different color. So we work very, very well as a team. When she was younger, I would, you know, turn to her and her friends for basically as focus groups and to, you know, get feedback, especially in the toy industry. It was invaluable to have that, because you're right, as you say, if you're working on your own, if you're not as part of a team, you're working in a vacuum. And I equate it often to whoever invented sunglasses was probably some sort of seashell, and he was in a cave and he came out and his, you know, pupils were dilated and he's got these seashells. He says, well, these things work great, but they look so stupid. Nobody would ever wear them now. You know, 1,000 years later, of course, you know, they're a fashion accessory. So it can be very isolating. And, you know, I think the whole world now with the pandemic is starting to realize somewhat what it can be like for an inventor, because we work in a very isolated, quarantined environment quite often.
Yeah, in fact, I've done a couple videos focusing on iconic inventions that were developed during plagues and during times of quarantine. I mean, it's just that environment. If you're not in a cave as an inventor, sometimes what would happen is a pandemic will put you in a cave, and you're forced to just, your creativity goes up. I mean, our office has been flooded, and it's shocked me because my wife's a dentist, and she had the opposite effect. Nobody wants to go see a dentist in the midst of a pandemic. And she's like, I don't understand. You're a patent attorney. Like, how are you, is your office like bursting at the seams with new ideas? And I said, because everyone's at home. They don't have their even if they have a 9 to 5, they're able to work remote. They're not under the watchful eye of a supervisor. So they have that creativity is kind of unleashed, which of course, you know, you do it by design, and it's helpful to be nocturnal because the world is asleep. So you really get some peace and you get stuff done.
Absolutely. Well, that's a very logical and interesting fact that's coming forward now. It makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. I'm guessing there'll be a lot of patent applications that relate to household innovation and things that people are relating to, you know, by being locked down.
I'm sure, you know, over time when they look at a graph, there's going to be a huge jump of innovation during the pandemic, and that's natural. Now, sometimes outside influences. You just luck out as an inventor with timing. And do you think the proliferation of cell phones and cameras has really, the timing could not have been more perfect for the convergence of the selfie stick with that technology?
100%. When I was promoting it, you know, there was just a confluence of everything. the iPhone, because now that made it easier. Everybody had a camera on them. Not everyone had a point and shoot camera. Not every point and shoot camera had a remote control capability. It was only some of the Pentax series that did. And on top of that, wide angle lenses. So now people, were able to get group shots in more easily. And then just after that, the GoPro, the sports camera industry took off, and we partnered with them. We were supplying their media teams. We ended up at the Sochi Olympics with them. And that brought our more professional models into play as well. So that elevated the brand. And it just kept going. We celebrities, John Stamos took it with him on tour on the Beach Boys tour, using it on stage. So people saw our brand, they saw our products, got great reviews, and divers throughout the world, ours were designed because we were not just looking to, it wasn't a race to the bottom as far as getting the lowest cost items out there. I wanted high quality, because I have a lot of products that I grew up with that I still have, tripods and whatnot. I wanted my devices to be around 25 and 30 years from now. In fact, even the toys, people that had my original Disney toy from 1991, they still operate. These are the electronic digital toys, and the parents, I get letters that they've given them to their kids. So that's always on my mind. I'm looking for, to develop products that have a lot of longevity to them.
Yeah.
So you're right. It was just it was great timing. It all came together with,
It's funny, just as you mentioned that, when I was 12, my dream was to take this Rubik's Cube and make it spherical. And I won't get into the story here, but I was crushed when I found the product on store shelves. But when you talk about that expression that they don't make them like they used to, this is a toy from when I was 12 years old. I mean, this is the kind of quality that used to be put into products. So it's good to hear that you've taken that into account. One of the questions that we have from, actually both Paul and Ray are asking very similar questions, and it's about your patents. Paul was asking if you had design patents or utility patents. And Ray's question is, is having a utility patent, does it make it better for licensing? I don't know if you haven't licensed your idea.
Yeah, I often, I keep certain channels for myself, and I license other channels. So if we go back in time with the Disney products, I kept as house accounts, Toys R Us in the US at the time and in Canada. I kept all the Disney stores and theme parks worldwide. But then I licensed the rest to companies that were strong in their countries, respectively. As far as the Quickpod, the Selfie Stick, yes, we licensed that. We had a company out of New Jersey that took it and co-branded their name with ours, got it into Best Buy, Target, Walmart, etc. So we focus on what we do best. I know what my limitations are, what my bandwidth is, what Sage's is. And, we have our own online sales. We sell on Amazon, but we also license on Amazon. And we've had a stellar year in the last year. Sage was able to obtain licensing agreements with several offshore companies that were selling on Amazon. And it was part of a pilot program on Amazon where they respected our utility patent. And we had it evaluated by them, and they deemed it in our favor as the equivalent of a court order. So we get licenses, royalties now as well. So it's a utility patent, I believe, is very useful. This is what I go for. I've had a couple of design patents that was just done at that time in the hope that, if it ever came up on imports, I thought maybe Homeland Security, if they saw something quickly, and they could say, well, it looks like this. It's a lot easier to, to convey an appearance versus what do all these patent claims mean. But I always go for utility patents.
Okay, and you mentioned, several, so really a portfolio. And just like you mentioned the iPhone, just like the iPhone has 49 plus patents protecting it, and they're not all filed on the same day. As different improvements are made, you file continuation applications and continue that way. So, and I'm in complete agreement with you on the design patent is a lot easier for a layperson to see infringement. So, I mean, you could be, like not know the first thing about how to read a claim, but when
Yes.
you see things match, it's
Yeah.
helpful for a design patent. But the utility really is the gold standard in terms of preventing.
Exactly. And when I go to license a product, if I am trying to pitch it to a company, I will usually come in with a trademark as well. So I'm pretty good at coming up with names. So I have trademarks, U.S. trademarks, the U.S. utility patent. I've got costing. I've got all the STL CAD CAM files. I've already gone to the mold making process, packaging. So I try to make it as turnkey as possible, and also proof of concept, getting it out there, getting it started, showing that there's interest, and then let other people run with it, because there's fewer people who are creative than people that can sell and distribute. So I do believe that our fellow inventors have a great advantage in that they can come up with ideas, and the average person just wonders, well, why didn't I think of that, or et cetera, et cetera. So, I have great respect for inventors, and I have great respect for the people who sell and distribute, but, they're different lanes. Often, sometimes they converge.
Right. And as far as your support system, especially the early days, was funding a challenge, or obviously, and then the follow-up question is going to be, how has prototyping become easier over the years? Because there's certainly with 3D printing and other technologies that are out there. But let's start with the first, which a lot of inventors, their first issue is, gosh, how do I get the funding to make my first prototype, or to get the patent, or any number of things?
Well, it is a lot easier today than it used to be. When I was doing the Beauty and the Beast mirror, I went to an art school, and I asked for a sculptor, and we started working on some designs based on the shape of the mirror that was to appear in the animation. And we had to simplify it. I had an early script from Disney. They liked what I was doing in other areas with them, so they gave me an advanced script from Beauty and the Beast and some images to work with. But we still had to manufacture it in a way that there were no undercuts, and costs were a factor as well. So I try to do as much as I can on my own. I learned as much as I could about prototyping as well. So I did wood, created in wood. I had some laser cut woods. That was even back in the 1990s. I was doing that, and plaster molds, and silicone. You have to be creative in that respect as well. But once you have something that kind of works, and it's put together with Scotch tape and whatever else you have. In fact, one of my products, the Nesquik milkshake maker, was a magic milkshake maker where the children would put in milk, ice cream, Nesquik powder, etc., and it had a little plunger handle on the top, and they would depress the plunger to get it going. And we had some thermal inks on the outside of the packaging that would turn chocolate brown when the milkshake was ready. That prototype, I spent $5 to build. I've got a Slurpee cup from 7-Eleven. I got a sink strainer from a kitchen supply store, like a Bed Bath & Beyond type store. And I just experimented with, different grades of milk, different types of ice cream, Nesquik flavoring, etc. And I spent no more than $5 on that one. So another time I had an idea for a product. It was a recreational activity game. And I think I spent about $3 creating this, and I went to New York and I licensed it. I got an advance for $50,000 just based on a $3 prototype. So a lot of it is, being inventive at the early stages. But if you do need money, of course, people are tapping out their credit cards or returning to family or friends. Get everything in writing. It's a good practice to have, good paper trail for whatever you do. Right. There's crowdsource funding now, which didn't exist, in the past. So you can turn to that. I'm a little reluctant to do that because I don't like to disclose ideas publicly like that, because there are a lot of companies that are just looking for whatever's doing well on a platform like Kickstarter, and then they're able to knock it off before you get your own out there. So I'm a little,
especially if you haven't filed. So if your patent hasn't come through yet.
100%. I agree. As far as today, I use many companies. One of the companies that I prefer, it's in Canada, called Proto 3000. They do a great job with my 3D printing. And, you know, if I go through, could be 100 prototypes, but we do it until we get it right. And I love it. It's just so much easier. I used to have to wait, you know, a month back and forth between China. They would send it, or I would fly to China. I'd sit in the prototype shop, be doing CNC and just sitting around, killing time. But I love 3D printing. We can, you know, look on your screen. You can do all the 3D rotation of the images and measurements. It's incredibly convenient these days, the technology that we have at our fingertips.
Yeah, it's great. One of the things that I get asked a lot by inventors, first of all, there's one misconception is that you have to have a prototype before you file for a patent. So that's completely not true. But the other one you've cleared up, and I have so many inventors that are embarrassed of their prototype because it's not fancy. It's made out of Play-Doh or foam cups or cardboard. And that's here. It's wonderful to hear a professional inventor who's done it, whose products have sold over $1 billion, talking about $3 prototypes and $5 prototypes, because you don't get extra points for spending a fortune on your prototype. The purpose is just test it and prove it.
Some of my prototypes for the Selfie Stick, I would use, you know, the little clip from a pen, you know, because I wanted to have a pocket adapter. In fact, right now, there you go. And I used umbrellas. That's it. You know, umbrellas. I would take the, you know, the rods apart. You know, I'm proud to be able to create things that efficiently and economically. In fact, some of my prototypes are actually on display right now in museums of technology in Germany for the original Selfie Stick, the Quickpod. So, you know, I'm proud of that.
Yeah.
A thumbtack was the original mirror on one of them, so that, you know, and I had, you know, measured the exact angle that it should be at, you know, so.
Wonderful. So we're out of time, but I can't thank you enough. This has been an inspiring interview. We will have you come back at the next virtual summit, and someday when this pandemic is behind us, back to real live events again. So it's a pleasure having you, an honor to have you on for our virtual summit.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.